now have the privilege of presenting another of those all too rare politicians that we would like to encourage and want to encourage. Congressman Tom Price is only now in his 5th year in the Congress, and the NTU rates Congress ratings, which, by the way, are highly respected because they are nonpartisan and because we don't cherry pick a few issues that will prove our point. When NTU rates members of Congress, the rating covers every vote that has any significant effect on spending, on taxes, or on debt. They are all taken into account. There's no place to hide. And it is a valuable rating, and anybody who earns the A rating, the Friend of the Taxpayer rating, is a rare and valuable member of Congress. Tom Price is one of them. He's received that Friend of the Taxpayer rating all 4 of his full years in Congress. I learned something interesting about him, that he was the first Republican majority leader in the Georgia State Senate just before he came to Congress, so he made some history. He is also a medical doctor with many years practical experience, and I just pray that they will listen to him on this healthcare issue. Tom is able to stay and take some questions, and we eagerly look forward to hear one of the taxpayers' best friends in the U.S. House, Representative Tom Price.
Thank you, David. Thank you so very, very much. Good evening. Great to be with you. How many Georgians we got out here? Just a few. Just a few. Thank you ever so much for that introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Thank you for what you do every single day to make certain that you hold people accountable and make certain that somebody is watching and helping us find the story. The work that you do is incredibly important. And I'll challenge you in a little bit to crank it up a notch, as they used to say, or kick it up a notch. Who was that fellow down there in New Orleans who was the cook? Throw that Tabasco in there. That's right. Kick it up a notch. I also want to thank Andrew Moylan. Andrew does a great, great job for you here in Washington. I represent the 6th District of Georgia, northern suburban Atlanta. Newt Soul District, for those of you who are political junkies. I'm in my 3rd term. I serve on the Financial Services and Education Labor Committee. As David mentioned, I'm a physician that spent 20 years in private practice of orthopedic surgery. And this year, I am privileged to chair the Republican Study Committee. The Republican Study Committee is the group of self-identified conservatives in the House. We've got about 115 folks, and a group of folks who many of you know well and are kindred souls. I promise you, kindred souls who are fighting the fight for freedom, which is in jeopardy, in case you hadn't noticed. We're here in Washington. How many of y'all have heard of the Republican Study Committee? Oh, about a third, quarter. I would urge you, please, to look us up. Google Republican Study Committee, go online, take a peek at what we're doing. We are trying to use some of that new media to make certain that we're communicating with you as best as we can, and to fight the fight. The challenges that we face right now are remarkable, as you well know. But ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed to live in the greatest nation in the history of the world. A nation that has provided more opportunity and more liberty and more freedom and more success for more individuals than any nation in the history of mankind. One would think, if you buy that premise, buy that history, that in times of challenge in this nation, we would embrace the principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world, right? That's what you ought to do, right? Go back to principles. Instead, the numbers are astounding. The senator referred to a few of them. You check me on my math. I don't know. We started a little over a year ago with $29 billion for Bear Stearns. We got into last summer, a couple $100 billion for the housing industry, on to Fannie and Freddie, another couple $100 billion. Then in September, the $700 billion debacle that became TARP. AIG actually came for their first tranche, their first $40 billion before that, and then they picked up another 40 or 45 billion after that, on into the winter when the two automobile companies came and got about $19 billion, on into January, a $1.1 trillion non-stimulus spending bill. Then to the budget that the senator referred to, $3.6 trillion, $410 billion in an omnibus bill, and then on and on and on. What's all that add up to? What's it add up to? Debt. It adds up to debt. It adds up to a political economy. We're no longer in a free market capitalist economy right now. We are in a political economy. What does that mean? It means that politicians are picking winners and losers every single day and every single term. What's it look like? It looks like an administration who says to the CEO of a privately held company, we don't think you're doing a good job, it's time to go home, and they force him to go home. It looks like a federal government that owns majority partnership, majority control of two privately held companies, previously privately held companies. It looks like members of Congress who call up individuals in the administration and say, I want my home bank to get money, and it does. Who call up individuals in the administration and say, I don't want my car dealership to be shut down, and they're not. That's a very, very dangerous place to be. And that's where we are right now. And the specific numbers this year are astounding. We're borrowing 50 cents on every single dollar that we spend. Borrowing 50 cents on every single dollar we spend. It's phenomenal. $3.6 trillion budget this year, $1.8 trillion in deficit just this year alone, $12 trillion of new debt. That's more debt than has been created by this nation from George Washington to George W. Bush. $12 trillion in the next 10 years under this president's budget. Now, what do we hear from the other side? Well, we get czars. Anybody want to share with me this fascination about czars? 16th century czars. It's phenomenal. It's astounding that that is the response and the answer to so many things. We get czars and we get control. I asked myself a couple months ago, I said, now why on earth is this administration responding in the way that they are? And the cabinet, looked at the cabinet, and it occurred to me two things were in place. One is that the ideology, well, the power hungriness was there from the very beginning, but the ideology. They're individuals who sincerely believe they can make better decisions for you about anything at all than you can make for yourself. That's why we get the health care challenge. But also, I asked my staff to find out how many folks in this cabinet have ever signed the front side of a paycheck. You know, have ever employed anybody? Have ever in the cabinet? How many folks in the cabinet have ever hired anybody, employed anybody? You know what the answer is? Two. One is Robert Gates, who's Secretary of Defense, holdover from the Bush administration. The other, Salazar, in agriculture, was a farmer. That's two. Everybody else, their entire default, their entire being has been either in academia or public service or something where they have no idea what it means to create jobs. No idea what it means to go out and put your family's financial well-being on the line in order to have a business survive. So it's just not in their being. So the challenges that we have are incredibly immense. Now what's the solution? Well, the solution, as I mentioned and alluded to, is to get back to basics. Principle. We've got to get back to the fundamental principles that made us, in fact, the greatest nation in the history of mankind. And that's what the Republican Study Committee is trying to do. We've put forward positive solutions to the challenges that we face. So when the nonsense spending bill came out earlier this year, the $1.1 trillion bill, we put an economic stimulus act in legislative language, in a bill form that would have, in fact, stimulated the economy. Still needs to be done, right? Here we are, 2 million jobs lost later, and trillions of dollars out the door, and nothing getting better. And it can't get better because they're violating economic law. What they're putting in place is not possible. You can't borrow and spend your way to prosperity. No nation has ever done it. We're not about to be the first, right? I promise you. So we're putting forward positive solutions. We had a balanced budget bill that we put on the floor, balanced budget amendment that we put on the floor for a vote. When the president came out, the Democrats came out with their proposal, we put out an energy bill that embraces innovation and production, utilizing American energy for Americans, and incentivizes conservation. So positive solutions that we have put out there. And our challenge, your challenge, together our challenge, is to make certain that the American people know that there are individuals who are out there fighting as hard as they can, and that there are positive solutions to the challenges that we face that embrace fundamental American principles. Let me close by leaving you with a few notes of optimism. You ready for a little optimism? All right, I thought we might be. Optimism. One, we are recruiting incredible candidates all across this land because there are many people just like you who say, my country is slipping away, and it's time for me to stand up. And so in districts all across this land, in states all across this land, we are recruiting individuals. People are standing up and saying, it's time for me to commit myself to public service because I can't stand what's going on back there in Washington. And so the quality of candidate and the messenger that we will be putting forward is truly remarkable. That's the first reason for optimism. Second reason are the president's numbers. You know, you get these talking heads on television that say he's the most popular president, on and on. Well, that isn't necessarily so. But the numbers that I would urge you to look at are the strongly approved numbers and the strong disapproved numbers. And the strong approved numbers started in this administration in the 70s. And you know where they are now? Mid-30s, low to mid-30s. Something they measure every single day. And the strong disapproved of this administration, that started at 14%. You know where it is now? Low to mid-30s. In fact, one day last week they were at parity. The slope of the strong approved number is going down. The slope of the strong disapproved number is going up. That's an administration that at this stage is in deep trouble with the American people, I promise you. Third reason for optimism is the generic ballot. You know that question that they ask every single week across this land? If the election were held today, would you vote for the Democrat for Congress, or would you vote for the Republican for Congress? That's the question. And 4 of the past 5 weeks, we have had Republicans be either at parity or above, and that hasn't happened since the spring of '03. That hasn't happened since the spring of '03. There's something going on out there, ladies and gentlemen. Final reason for optimism is you and all sorts of wonderful Americans across this land who cannot believe what's happening to their nation. And they are making themselves known. The angst right now, this early in this administration's history, is phenomenal. All sorts of people asking, what can we do? The Tea Parties were a classic example of it, and you saw it. Many of you, I suspect, participated. But the beauty of our system is that the people are still in charge. And the solution, I would suggest to you, won't come from Washington. It'll come from the American people all across this land who will rise up in righteous indignation and do what Samuel Adams, one of our founders, said ought to be done, and that is that it doesn't take a majority to prevail, but an irate and tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. And that's what you and I are trying to do, set those brush fires of freedom in the minds of men and women all across this land. If we do our job and you do your job, I promise you, November 2010 will be a glorious month as we take our nation and our government back. Thank you ever so much. God bless you. Sir? We got a question right here. Yes, sir.
But I think both you and Senator McCain are fighting the last battle when you keep talking about how much money the Obama administration has already spent. I think we have a chance to get ahead of the curve with what Secretary Geithner proposed today. I have no problem with the czar being set up to handle the people who took stimulus money. If they want to work for the government, they should be paid government wages. But when Geithner is talking about setting executive compensation for all the public sectors in America, we cannot have it. If we're ever going to get out of this mire, that we're walling around with. We need every bit of imagination and ingenuity we have. And the way to do that is through proper compensation. And the first thing to do is to repeal what your predecessors did in the 90s when they set a limit of $1 million for an executive pay. Can you imagine if anybody with all these marbles to run Coca-Cola for $1 million a year? Isdale took home $28 million last year, but it was done with good incentive. Obviously, we had terrible incentive plans for the people who are running the mortgage and for the people in the bank. But what we have to do is keep the right for executives and good consultants to tell us how.
Pardon me, sir, would you ask your question, please? Let's do avoid statements and ask questions, please.
No, I appreciate your comments, and I would encourage you, again, to look at the communications that we're putting out, the Republican Study Committee. We put out a release on that, on the limitation of executive compensation. It is none of the government's business what anybody makes in a private industry. It just isn't. That's just wrong. There's no way that we will get back to the wonderful, glorious, successful, and entrepreneurial economy that has provided more success for more individuals ever if the government has got its hand in every pot around our economy. It just won't work, can't work. Yes, sir.
I just want to say, first of all, you guys do a great job analyzing legislation. I worked with Congressman Sally out of Idaho and got to see. If you want to know what the legislation is doing, look at the ROC website. You've got a breakdown of every single bill on there. But what I wanted to ask is, it seemed to me, through my association with Bill, that really the problem is Congress is screwed up. You can't get good legislation to hearing except through motions to recommit. You don't have hearings on actual bills. You have bills that are combined with very large public policy. How do you fix Congress, which seems to be at the root of the problem?
Great question. The processes in Congress don't allow for the kind of deliberation that all of us learned about in our civics classes. It just doesn't happen. The bills are decided by and large behind closed doors, and then they're jammed through in a majority vote. It's not the kind of process that all of us think is the ideal and ought to be occurring in the House of Representatives, at least in the House. The Senate's a different body. How do you fix that? You fix it by leadership. It takes leadership. And we have a woeful lack of leadership right now in the House of Representatives that's leading the show. The Speaker is jamming at every single turn. And that is changed. The leadership of the House of Representatives is changed by the American people. It takes people and I believe they're beginning to understand and appreciate that the processes, a fair and open process, is imperative to a fair and appropriate outcome for the American people. And thank goodness we have an election every 2 years. You know, people back home say, well, doesn't it bother you to run every 2 years? I say, shoot, no. If we didn't run every 2 years, then you wouldn't have an opportunity to kick the bums out. You know, you've got to have an opportunity to get the dead wood gone. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for your leadership in the Republican Study Group. That is an outstanding organization. I check your website all the time. My good friend John Campbell, who he and I wrote the Deficit Prevention Act of California many years ago. We're going to make another run at that. Just one quick question. I'm hoping that as a Californian, you will refuse to bail out our state or put pressure on Tim Geithner not to bail out our state. Our state does not deserve it. We are going to be running out of cash in 5 weeks. But the last thing we need at this point is any kind of federal assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll tell you, one of the effects that we are indeed having is moving forward with some positive solutions. We introduced a regulatory reform bill today that has at its core no more bailouts and put in place the structure that would not allow for any more bailouts. Amazingly, I was also in a committee hearing today where the chairwoman of the committee used California as an example of fiscal responsibility. And it was astounding. It was astounding. I had to remind her that California was going broke, or was broke. Is broke. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Well, I want to thank you for your service in the House, first of all. And I want to ask, are you going to support Congressman Ron Paul's H.R. 27 The audit of the Federal Reserve?
I'm a sponsor.
All right,
Yeah.
fantastic.
The reason that's important is because so many aspects of our federal government have run away and haven't had the appropriate oversight or accountability. And that's not the way, again, in our civics books that we learned that things ought to work. We're a system of government that has three branches that provide for the checks and balances. And that's where the American people are very concerned right now. They don't see any checks and balances here in Washington. And that, I believe, is what's going to draw people out in November of 2010 to a huge degree, where they're going to demand checks and balances. Right here. You pick them. I'm happy to take them.
Sir, can you tell us, if we had fair tax enacted right now, how would that affect the need for us to even meet this stimulus?
The question is, if we had the fair tax right now, how would that affect our need for the stimulus? I'm an original co-sponsor of H.R. 25, have been since the first day I arrived in Congress. I am a strong supporter of the fair tax, the national retail sales tax, because it is the only kind of revenue producer for the federal government that aligns our form of taxation with our form of commerce and our form of economy. And so, in fact, it was curious because David and I were just talking earlier. I've been asked to get the specific answer to your question. What would be the effect to federal government revenue in the current kind of downturn? I don't believe that we would have seen the kind of downturn that we currently have with a national retail sales tax, because as you know, the business economy would thrive almost not regardless, but would thrive to a huge degree with the national retail sales tax, because we become competitive with any industry in the world. We would capture all of the underground economy. It's a less regressive system of taxation than the current system, and consumption is one of the most stable economic factors in our entire economy through all types of up and down swings. So we're working on the specific numbers in answer to your question, but I think it would have been much less. Yeah. The gentleman points out that the money held offshore would be just 10% of the overall stimulus package and he's right. I mean, and that money comes back onshore. And there are all sorts of, literally trillions of dollars right now sitting on the sidelines, here and overseas, that American individuals and American companies control. And they're doing so because they are not trusting a government that they don't know when it's going to come in and bail out their competition or dilute their own investment. And you would and likely are doing the same thing if you're in a situation to do so. I wouldn't put any money into a business right now, not knowing whether or not the government's going to come in and bail out my competition. That's what a political economy does. It stifles capitalism, it stifles free market capitalism, it stifles creativity, it stifles risk, it stifles entrepreneurship, it stifles success. And it will kill this nation if we continue in this direction. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
One more, I'm told.
One more.
Just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time, saved by the bell. Thank you so much. I think it's very important, and I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a lot of angst in the country, and I think there's a lot of polarization on the Hill between Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. I really don't care which party affiliation is. But I don't hear any of you taking or feeling the pain that I'm feeling, or any other taxpayer in this room, whether it's about health care, salaries, jobs. Take your pay increases, you guys that are under pay increase federal employees. What pain, what amount of money are you willing to deduct from your salary and health care benefits that will help us taxpayers?
The specific answer to your question in terms of what amount of pain have I gotten specifically, well, my wife wouldn't be pleased to show you our 401k, but if we did, you would see the amount of pain that we suffer. The answer to your question, I think, suggests that there isn't any merit to the work that many of us are doing and trying as hard as we can up here. I understand fully the challenges that are going on across this nation. If I thought for 1 minute, if I took $1 in salary or no salary at all, that would have a positive outcome on what is going on right now, then I'd be the first one to do so. But that strikes me a little bit as the kind of class warfare that the other side uses over and over and over again to just divide us as a nation. That's not what we are. We're Americans. We ought to be putting arm together with arm and pulling together to solve the challenge that we've got right now, instead of having individuals take political advantage over and over and over and over again and making political decisions. That's not how we became, again, I keep repeating we're the greatest nation in the history of mankind. One, because it's true, and two, because there's a reason that we got there. It just didn't happen by chance. It happened because men and women worked together through the challenges that we have had in our history. And what I see right now is an administration and individuals in the political process that aren't interested in working together and addressing the challenges that we've got. I'm here to tell you there are folks who want to embrace fundamental American principles and work together to solve them in a way that makes it so that my son, your children, your grandchildren, and those of everybody in this room will be able to realize wonderful opportunity and wonderful potential and wonderful success when they get onto their glory years. So, you know, we got to pull together as Americans. As you mentioned, these aren't Republican problems or Democrat problems, they're American problems. And the sooner we do that, the better off we'll be. But it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango. Thank you all so very much. God bless you.